Order. If committee members will find their places, I'm going to ask Representative Shaw Blackman to say a short prayer for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you join me in prayer, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you with humble hearts and humble minds, and we ask that you bless these proceedings and keep us ever mindful of the citizens that we serve here in the state of Georgia. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, and today we'll be considering 5 resolutions that have been turned in, and we will consider them in the order that they were dropped into the House. And so first on our agenda today will be House Resolution 14 by Representative Raffensperger. Go ahead.
We good? Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I bring before you today House Resolution 14. I just want to explain really where this came from, and I want to give a shout out to this person. A few years ago, I heard a fellow named Ross Mason speak. And Ross Mason was the DCH chairman for nearly 8 years. And what he said that one day at this talk fascinated me and also confounded me. And he said that Georgia has this unique advantage that no other place in the world has. And that's the 5,000 PhDs and medical doctors at CDC. And so obviously as DCH, he understands the health, care, IT field and that. He said, are there ways that we could leverage that? And so that was really the foundation for my concept for a health study committee, or House Study Committee for Advanced High-Tech Health Incubators. So how do we pull together our universities, like Augusta University, Morehouse School of Medicine, Mercer School of Medicine, Georgia Tech, which is one of our top research universities in the country, UGA, which also now has a School of Medicine, Emory University. How do we pull those together, and can we leverage those with CDC and generate more high-paying income jobs? I know that there's several things. I've been talking to people, and I'm going to get off the stage here because I think there might be some folks that would like to speak to it. But in my research, became aware of the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And in that, the federal government offers investments for companies. And if you look at what we could do if we match that at the state level, not saying we need to, but perhaps we should study that. But what that would perhaps do is attract, innovators, researchers, some of the top researchers in America to live here in Georgia. So anecdotally, I know that's dangerous sometimes, but I met a fellow, a very sharp fellow that he moved here from India, and his father was a medical doctor and his brother was a medical doctor. He actually got his degree in computer science, advanced computers research, I guess, at Georgia Tech. Both of his sons got degrees in biomedical engineering, and they're on the West Coast. And I would love to see those guys be able to live here in Georgia. And so that's really where it is. And if you look at what we've done for the music industry, we've had some great success. But if we're honest, the floor of the music or the movie industry is maybe at this income level. And if you look at the floor for the healthcare, high-tech industry, and the technical side, you're probably, I would say minimum of probably $70,000 a year coming out of college. But some of those wages are starting at $90,000 to $100,000. And I just rather see people making $100,000 a year than $40,000. And so I thought if we had a study committee, maybe we could dig into some other options that we could consider moving forward legislatively. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Representative. And do we have any questions of Representative Raffensperger? I've got one.
Yes,
high tech. Kind of give an example of what you're talking about, high tech.
Well, when we say there's
in that field,
in the healthcare arena, I guess we have 8 of the top 100 health IT companies in the U.S. that are already located here. On this map right here, you can see some of the companies that we already have in Georgia, and they're creating high-income jobs. And so that's what we're really talking about, health innovators. But also, from that standpoint, we could have people that are in the advanced, health arena, like new technologies or new systems, new solutions. I would say that Baxter is a great example of what the governor did when he attracted them to come to Georgia, and the kind of high-income jobs that creating out there towards Lake Oconee.
Okay. Representative Blackman, did you have a question?
Yes, sir, and Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I probably pushed it too many times. My light's not working, but Representative, real quick, I know you've got health incubator down here, but since you've probably looked at this in depth, are there any other areas that popped up on the radar, aerospace or, anything
I was really
else?
on this. I was really focused in. I love aerospace. As an engineer, I'm not in aerospace, but I love aerospace. I love Spaceport Camden. Don't get me going on that one. But that would probably be. I was really looking more health related. And what we could come out from the health industry. We're already a leader in health IT. Are there more that we could do there, but also leveraging and broadening that field of just the whole health industry?
Thank you.
Representative Rakestraw.
Working? Oh,
You did.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So, this is great. I'm a huge proponent of technology, high tech, and since I'm on science and technology, but can you have this also encompass biotech? Because, a lot of people think we're still in the information age, but we're actually in the age of biotech.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see Georgia positioned to seize biotech because it will carry us for the next 50 years. So can you incorporate that into what you're doing
absolutely.
to make
I
sure we're
would
looking
welcome
at how to seize biotech in our
Yeah.
state?
I would welcome that addition to the study committee if you decided to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Are there any in the public who would like to make comment on
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Raffensperger's resolution? If you would, come to the microphone, identify yourself and who you're with, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. My name is Larry Williams. I'm the President and CEO of the Technology Association of Georgia, commonly known as TAG. And delighted to be here to support this resolution. We think it really does hit a lot of the points. And I really enjoyed the discussion and the questioning that we heard here today. So HR 14, I think, could really help develop a great plan of action for us to really pull together a lot of different components to help us maintain this great position that we have in health IT. Just a little bit of background about TAG. As the Association of Georgia, we do have over 2,000 technology companies as our members. Individual members exceed over 35,000 members statewide. We convene, we celebrate, we connect, and we do things to support the growth of that industry statewide. So, and we do it through a lot of events, we do it through a lot of programming, and then also advocating for the right policies to help us continue to grow and position this this great industry. Just a little bit about the industry itself and why we think it's so important here is that Georgia is often referred to right now as the health information capital of the United States. We have the most companies, we have the most employees, and it's not just the employees themselves, it's about the thought leadership, the engineering, the software development, the testing that really is developed right here and that is distributed actually worldwide. So when we talk about a global center, we really can prove it. As we think about just health IT itself, there's more than 200 companies that are involved in that, and there's close to about $5 billion worth of revenue that are attributed just to health IT. Now, to contrast that with the representative's question, if we look at the entire bioscience industry, then we're looking at more than 100,000 jobs and about $23 billion of impact. And as we know, most every company is a technology company, and all of these jobs are affected by technology in some way. This intersection continues to be more and more important to all of us. One of the big drivers is also the ecosystem that we have here, and part of it is the non-governmental organizations like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Cancer Society, the Arthritis Foundation, CARE, the Carter Center and the work they do, the Task Force for Global Health. This really makes Atlanta the envy of a lot of places in the U.S. because it pulls together, again, a lot of the people that are driving how we attack healthcare in this country and really the implications worldwide. So these are extremely important assets. And when we think about that and then compare it or combine it with the private sector industry that we have with, as the representative mentioned, 8 of the top 100 companies are based right here in Georgia. And again, just among the top 100 in the nation, the Healthcare of Informatics magazine cumulative total, again, close to $5 billion. I call that significant. So, but there's companies like McKesson, MedAssets, Greenway Health, HealthPort. There are a lot of others. And you'd ask the question, a lot of these companies are thinking about how we do telemedicine in the future, how we're going to reach the patients of the future. It's about health records and how we manage them in a digital world. On the cover of our Hub magazine, we have this gentleman in Visalia that focuses on health IT records, and he's headquartered down in Valdosta. And this is very important that we also recognize that this is a statewide industry and important to all of us around the state. Just a little bit more, just to really, help put an emphasis on it. Georgia's healthcare sector grew by about 1.5% between 13 and 14, most relevant data, reaching about 450,000 workers. But technology specific occupations grew by about 9%. So the demand for these types of jobs continues to grow, and there still continues to be a gap that we need to fill because the demand is that high. But again, every company today is touched by technology. Computer and information system managers are the highest paid technology occupations in Georgia's healthcare sector, and with average annual wages of about $100,000, 109 to be specific. So these are well-paying jobs, these are great paying jobs, and there's huge demand. So making sure that we have the right workforce to be able to address them is going to be increasingly important as we move forward. And we need to think about it as the pipeline. It's everything from the STEM skills that the children need to prepare them for the higher education to get into these lines of work. But the demand is here, the jobs are here, and they're just going to continue to grow. So it really, Georgia is the right place at the right time for a lot of these people. Excuse me. The Georgia's leading academic and research universities are already very much involved in this. Obviously, Georgia Tech, Emory, Georgia State, Mercer, all of them have some kind of capacity in here, but it's going to continue to grow. So we think that these health IT courses, curriculums are going to be very important to us. I don't know if I'm doing something or not, but just in conclusion, I think we just really wanted to put an emphasis on how important this industry sector is to the state of Georgia, the opportunity that that it presents, and then also let's not take anything for granted. We got to make sure that we continue to make sure that we have the ability to position ourselves and that we continue to have that we want to continue to be an envy of the world of why we have this industry here and we want to continue to grow it. And a lot of that is about connecting and supporting the health IT industry that's here today. And so it's really about the talent, it's about the business climate, it's about the innovation, the capital, the private sector, the public sector, and the non-governmental organizations all coming together to help us promote this great ecosystem. And we really are excited about the resolution because we think that it can help support that.
Okay,
Thank you for
very
your time.
much.
Thanks for the time.
Do we have others that would like to speak to the resolution? Representative Raffensperger, you did have one minor change that you wanted to make to this resolution, is that right?
I made it, sir. It's a House Study Committee.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Joint committee before.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak to this? Okay, if not, thank you for your presentation. Well, excuse me just a minute. Number 12.
Mr. Chairman, when the time is right, I'll like to make a motion to do pass.
Yeah, these are hearings only.
Only hearings,
today,
okay.
And so we will not be taking any motions. All right, so next on our agenda then is, and I'm going to take these in order. Representative Rakestraw has a resolution. That's
Okay, this is House Resolution 39, and this is to create a House Study Committee to study the tier tax credit system for economic development. We have a tier tax credit system in our state, and it was originally a revitalization plan, but it has become something that has put a lot of counties at a disadvantage when it comes to economic development. And we should be competing as a state for jobs, because when economic development comes to our state, you know, these companies will look at North Carolina, they'll look at Texas, and they'll look at Georgia, and they'll pick, you know, a county or two that meets their criteria in Georgia. They'll pick, you know, a couple in North Carolina and Texas as an example. And then these tier tax credits are part of something in the negotiation phase, but they've already ruled out whether or not we're going to meet their needs. And so we need to be looking at, is this really working for us as a state? Because we really need to be competing as a state and not competing county to county. But there has been no data and there has been no information that anybody's really looking at this to say, is this really working for us as a state? And so this study committee is to really look at this and to see, you know, is there a better way for us to attract business to our state than to put some counties at a bigger advantage and a disadvantage? For instance, the county I'm from in Paulding, we're not on an interstate. We have a high population, but like I think over 85% of our population commutes outside the county to work every day. And we are considered a Tier 4 county, which is the lowest tier. So we're being treated like we're in Metro Atlanta County on an interstate, and we've had a lot of trouble attracting jobs. And so I think we really need to analyze for counties like ours, you know, is there a better way to do this if we want to keep the tax credit system, or is this really even working for us as a state? So I would urge you to support this resolution so that we can be more competitive throughout our state and not just give one county over another, and so that we can compete, you know, from one state to another, because that's really the way we're competing now versus when this was created back in the day. Any questions?
Are there questions for Representative Rakestraw? Well, again, I have one. Now, the tier system basically goes because of a county's ability to create, or because of a county's, how do you, can you explain a little bit about what that tier system is?
They have criteria that they base, and one of them is population, and that, you know, population, income, and things that they rate a county on to determine what tier they're in. So because we're part of Metro Atlanta, we have a big population, but we don't have a lot of jobs. So most people are commuting outside of our county, which really affects our traffic patterns in our state too, because a lot of people are commuting from our side of town to go to other areas of Atlanta. But if we can attract jobs to the western side of our state, I mean, if you draw a line down our state, everything, all the growth's going to the east side of the state. You've got the technology corridor up 85. You've got the Georgia 400. You know, you in the Augusta area, you've got cybersecurity, you know, bringing a lot of jobs and opportunities. You look at the Camden Spaceport and what they're doing, that's going to, you know, bust that area of town. And you've got Savannah. So all the growth in our state is going to the east side of our state, but we need to be looking at what's going on the western side and how to move jobs to that area. And this tier tax credit system puts a lot of counties at a disadvantage like ours, where we're not on an interstate, and so we're already at a disadvantage location-wise, but you know, we're being given the worst tax incentive. But I don't even know if this is really working for us as a state, because we're not measuring it, we're not getting data. How many companies are actually taking advantage of this? When we win business, how often did this come into play? When we lose business, how often was that a factor? I think we need to really analyze comprehensively whether or not this is working for us as a state. Because, you know, the governor's tagline, I believe, is One Georgia, yet we're not really competing as One Georgia. We're competing county to county. And I think to increase our success, we need to be looking at this and really finding a way to compete as One Georgia.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Representative Rakestraw? If not, is there anyone here to speak to this resolution from the public? Okay, if not, thank you very much for your presentation. The next resolution that we'll consider is House Resolution 283 by Representative Kirby. You're changing that one. Okay. All right, then we'll go to House Resolution 318 by Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bringing you House Resolution 318. This is dealing with a follow-up that came through our Budget Committee meetings. We appropriated quite a bit of money for our IPSI scholarships. Right now we have 7 institutions in the state of Georgia that, in IPSI, let me back up, Inclusive Post-Secondary Education. This is for our intellectual and developmental disability students. Really, these scholarships allow them to take classes and get into to situations where they are certainly more active and more productive in their communities, and a lot of them are able to live on their own. And what this study committee is wanting to do is look at our technical college system. Right now we have 2 of them that are participating already in the IPSI program, and see if we can't develop a core of study to actually generate a TCC or technical certificate for an IPSI student to attain through the technical college system through the scholarships that we funded in the budget. We think it'd be really beneficial to them, also to the state of Georgia as we continue to help them be more in the mainstream and be more productive and socially and professionally successful in everything they want to do. So that's what this committee will be looking at, working with our technical college system and the IPSI students. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, are there questions, Representative Irby? If not, thank you for your presentation. And the next resolution then would be 353. Representative Rakestraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so what I have is House Resolution 353, and this is to create a study committee for a bill that I have dropped in a constitutional amendment. We have a couple of really chronic problems in our state and in our nation and in our world, but I want to position Georgia to really solve these problems in a innovative, revolutionary way. And one of the problems we have is with mental health and addiction in our state. And the other one is with human trafficking. We're the capital of the world because of our airport, our international airport. And we have a bill, HB 509, that actually works on the demand side of trafficking, because we can't prosecute our way out of this problem. So we need to work on the demand side. And on the demand side, one of the biggest drivers of human trafficking is pornography, child pornography. There's access to prostitution hubs. It is one of the biggest drivers. And I have some people from out of state that have come in to testify on this bill. And so I have House Bill 509, and I want to do it. But by the time we got it drafted and dropped, it's working in several states now. We missed the cut, well, it was right at the cutoff, so there really wasn't time to work it. But I want to study this in the interim so that when we come back next year, you know, we have a lot of good information and we've thoroughly studied this issue. But the other issue that I want to solve in our state is our issues with mental health and addiction. It impacts so many areas of our state. It impacts our homelessness problem. It impacts our suicide rates. It impacts our veterans with PTSD. It breaks apart families because we have so many people in our state that are afflicted by mental health and addiction issues. And actually, I wish we didn't call it mental health because it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's mental, and we've got to start dealing with this in a holistic way. And I'm finding that most of the effective treatment is coming out of the nonprofit world. And so what I would like to do is bring what's working with the long-term residential treatment with some traditional counseling resources and some holistic treatments that treat the person as a whole and not just says, well, here's a pill, but don't do drugs, and masks the underlying problems, because most of the underlying problems with human trafficking and addiction goes back to childhood trauma. And when we can start treating people holistically, we can really start making a difference in people's lives. And so in order to, prepare for this bill coming down, this study committee is to work on that. And I want to call Chris Sevier from, he's from Tennessee.
Well, just a moment. We'll, after we see if the panel has any questions.
Oh, okay. Well, I might need him to help me answer some questions. So, yeah, go ahead and come up here in case I need help with this. But anyway, I'll stop there and take questions, and then I'm going to let him speak. And we have a couple other people here to testify on this.
Representative Turner.
Thank you. I don't know if this 10.
Yeah, did I cut you off? There we go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Rakestraw. You mentioned in this, in some of the preamble to this resolution around the link between human trafficking. You also mentioned addiction. This year we've had a lot of discussion around casino gambling in our state. And there are studies out there today that link human trafficking and addiction to casino gambling as well.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be interested in maybe adding a section to this to talk about the detrimental impact on casino gambling in our state?
Well, actually, that is one of the sources that I looked at for funding, because casinos don't drive addiction. The addictions already exist. We already have people in our state addicted to pornography, addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs, and they need help. And to me, gambling is a voluntary tax that would help do that. And I don't think casinos create the problem with the pornography addiction and the human trafficking. It may facilitate some of it, but then again, our Atlanta airport is the biggest facilitator. It's why we're the capital of the world. So I wouldn't want to shut down the Atlanta airport because it has a viable purpose. And it's my belief that if we could take casino gambling, and I'm willing to study it and add that to the bill, but if we could take that as a voluntary tax to fund something that's going to heal lives, put families back together, and solve a huge problem in our state that impacts our schools, it impacts our criminal justice system, our jails, our prisons, our DFACs. They're all overburdened. And if we could solve those problems, I would be willing to do casino gambling. But I am willing to study it and talk about it if you want to add that. But I don't want to talk about it from the perspective that it would be a detriment, because I believe it would solve a problem.
That would be certainly something I'd like to explore with you, because there are studies that show a direct link between human trafficking and casino gambling. And specifically addiction and gambling addiction, it would become a problem, as well as the impact on our services such as DFACs, which you mentioned specifically as a concern in this resolution. So I would encourage you to consider that, and I would be more than willing to share with you some data and studies that show the link between addiction and casinos.
Yeah, so again, it's just not my belief that casinos drive addiction. Childhood trauma is the biggest driver of addiction, and when we heal that, we heal the addiction. So anyway, but I'm willing to add that and have that discussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Number 7.
Hi, Representative Rackstraw. I guess I'm concerned about the fact that you want to have a study committee and you want to include the human sex trafficking, I can see is one, and the part about the child pornography and the links to the prostitution hubs. Is all this gonna be in one study committee?
Yes.
Where you will have time to also look into the addiction for with veterans with PTSD and the state family unit. All this gonna be one study committee.
Yes.
Okay, because I guess I could look at it with it being broken down into maybe 2 study committees, because it look like that is a lot, but I can see how some of it can tie in together, but it look like from 12 to 17 on down, look like it need to be a study committee within itself.
Well,
But-
I agree. It is a lot, and it is a big problem to solve. However, there are a lot of new paradigms in addiction treatment, and so I think really looking at those and what's working and what's effective, because the addictions are there. Again, they just manifest in different ways: pornography, gambling, alcohol, drugs. The addictions exist, and it's just hurting and broken people that need help. And most people don't get clean or sober until they get in our prison system, and that's not really helping them. That's almost like throwing them a boat anchor and asking them to swim. But I actually want to bring in treatment that's going to be effective and get people clean and sober. And actually, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety; it's actually connection. And they're finding that with the new studies that they're doing regarding addiction. So a lot of the old paradigms, that we're still operating from, are no longer relevant. And so I really want to study it as a whole, because the ones that are also broken and addicted and have the trauma are also the ones the most susceptible to the trafficking. And I have someone here that can attest to that, because they're out there searching and struggling to just be present and move forward in life. And that's a lot of the problems we have with our homeless population. I have someone here to really testify to that as well. But I thank you for your question. I would like to do it in one comprehensive study, because I think the root problem is the same, and being able to heal it and bring effective treatment that is a one-time deal. They go in one time, they're not going through a revolving door of treatment where they go in and out every few weeks and we put them back in their environment. We actually have a long-term plan to treat these people, get them whole, healed, connected, and productive in life.
Does that answer your question? Number 15.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Rakestraw, I'm kind of in the same place with Representative Scott, because I have to be honest, I think what you're pursuing is great and is definitely needed. But I've honestly gotten lost in what it is you're trying to do, because you opened up talking about the online activity. So my first thought, where you were going to be looking at these different avenues to determine how, because you talked about the demand and
Yes.
and how people are getting access to the business,
Right?
which is one aspect. But then you have the lives that are affected through these various addictions, which is another aspect. And it just seemed like it would get, what you're trying to accomplish will get lost, because there are 2 very distinct avenues that need to be researched.
Yeah. Okay, so let me pull it together for you. The reason it's one study committee is because there are actually 2 bills that have dropped, and we're studying, but they go together, because one is the Human Trafficking Prevention Act, which is House Bill 509, and the other is a constitutional amendment that takes the money that is created from the Human Trafficking Prevention Act, and it's a constitutional amendment to dedicate those funds to long-term effective mental health and addiction treatment. So that's the other reason I'm studying it together and brought it all together on one study committee, because it is studying the viability of that whole program that I have put together, and it is 2 separate bills but related. Does that make sense? Does that help any? But it is the same underlying root problem, is the broken, hurting, addicted people that create the behaviors that we're talking about.
Number 11. Well, that's what I thought. Okay. All right, and now if you will introduce your guest that's going to
Okay.
speak to this.
So my first guest is Chris Sevier from Tennessee, and I'll let him give you his background and talk about how this Human Trafficking Prevention Act came about, and then you can introduce.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for hearing this. The problem with the world is the human heart, and the second problem is our failure to admit that. That would be one of the second greatest problems. And there's many influences on our hearts that can be very toxic. And there's many subjects that do interconnect, because this is very simple. There's people have pain. They want to deal with their pain. Maybe they'll go to gambling to numb their pain. Maybe they'll use drugs. Maybe they'll hire a prostitute. Maybe they'll use pornography. And so there's certain influences that are subversive to human flourishing and can really create a lot of harm. And so these matters are not simplistic. They're not whimsical. These matters are not reductionistic. These matters are very complex. So here's the status of what's happening right now. We have 42 states right now working on the Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation Prevention Act. Georgia is one of those and leading the way in many respects. It's a complex bill. I'm going to try to break that down. Then there's a resolution that's been introduced by the representative that declares pornography as a public health crisis. That resolution was passed in Utah into law in April of 2016. It's been passed unanimously in Virginia's House and the Senate, and all of the sponsors of the human trafficking bill are now also introducing that resolution. The resolution effectively kind of identifies the enemy. It's like saying, an argument can be made, it would be like saying radical Islamic terrorism is an influence that's promoting terrorism, for example, to identify it. So the resolution says that online pornography and online prostitution hubs are very much facilitating a litany of secondary harmful effects, just like strip clubs have secondary harmful effects. And gambling casinos, the Supreme Court's found that it can proliferate secondary harmful effects. And so I'm going to, so the resolution breaks it down, what kind of identifies the problem, but the solution is the human trafficking bill. And it's taken us 3 years of multi-state federal litigation to come up with this bill. And so I'm just going to give two quick narratives if I can. One, I'm going to tell you the background of my background, sort of how the bill came about. And then secondly, I'm going to kind of walk through what the bill is and why it would be important to have a study committee. On the federal side, we're working on federal legislation on this front, and there's already been a congressional committee formed years ago that kind of looked into this matter. But now we've kind of taken it a step further. And so if Georgia does this study, I can about guarantee you that all surrounding states are going to lean on that study. And I think it'd be very helpful. Georgia could lead the way in a sense in that respect. So I went to Vanderbilt undergrad, Vanderbilt Law School, was a judge advocate general in the United States military, deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom in Mosul. I was almost killed by insurgents. I decided from there to become Christian overseas missionary, so I started going on these mission trips, and that was led to the world of human trafficking. And so I joined with FBI and special forces to do extractions overseas in places like Cambodia, Thailand, and Malaysia. And in getting trained up for that, I came to realize that we were just piddling with a symptom, that we were not addressing the real problem. I mean, you go and rescue a girl from human trafficking, a lot of times the traffickers just go pick up the same girl and put her right back in. Or they go get a brand new girl and they bring her in. Or even worse, we've seen it where the girl's like, no, I don't want to leave. I have no other options. So I was looking at this going, we cannot prosecute our way out. Like she mentioned, we have to do something as lawmakers to try to prevent the door from ever being open. And the truth is that if we look at all the evidence, it's unequivocal that easily accessible prostitution hubs online pornography, child exploitation, increase in domestic violence, increase in female objectification, there's like this interconnected continuum, even with cartels involved in the back end of that, and they're all interrelated. So what I did is as a lawyer, just issue spotted that, the superseding cause, the but-for causation is really the tech companies, the distributors, because without the laptop or without the cell phone that turns on and off, there is no online prostitution hub. There is no child online pornography or this obscenity which promotes that. So basically, I was looking at it going, these companies are violating products liability. They're completely disregarding state obscenity laws, federal obscenity laws. They're engaging in all kinds of false advertising by acknowledging in many ways that they try to promote their products as being family friendly when they're not. So I filed a lawsuit against Apple in federal court in the Middle District of Tennessee for those violations. Made international news and actually provoked British Prime Minister Cameron in direct responsiveness to give me exactly what I laid out, and kind of laid out in a way to say this is how this is constitutionally valid. And then litigating against Apple, that led to get litigation against Google, Microsoft, Verizon, HP, Samsung, basically all the major tech companies. We hauled them into court for racketeering and sex trafficking, racketeering and obscenity, racketeering and products liability, and a litany of other violations. And then that caused me to be called up to D.C. to meet with a lot of the federal senators, including members on the federal side from Georgia. And we basically decided. They could see that I was legislating through the courts because that's exactly what I was doing. And we sat down with members of the judiciary, really Senate Judiciary Committee members, and we decided, this is really a state law matter. We need to roll out state law legislation. And so they basically said, go write the bill for all 50 states, go get it going, and come back to us, and then we'll pass the federal version. So I'm like, okay, I'll put that on my to-do list. And so I did. I wrote the bill for all 50 states. We have 42 states working on it. In the federal side, we have either Senator Rubio and Senator Menendez who are going to introduce it through the Foreign Relations Committee, and if it goes Commerce, it will be Senator Cruz and Senator Markey, who are the ones with the candidates that have their names in the hat for being lead sponsors if it goes that way. And so this is a bill that cures the failures of the Communications Decency Act, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. And so I just wanted to give that quick, I'm sorry it took me longer than I wanted, but I just wanted to give some background to show that this is something that's come about after 3 years of multi-state federal litigation that's backed by unbelievable amounts of Supreme Court precedent that will really do something to solve this problem. There's all these senators up in D.C. that walk around with these red X's on their hands saying we're going to end human trafficking, and that's basically shallow and naive. The truth is that we will never get rid of human trafficking. But what we can do is we can do what we do with strip clubs. We take a strip club. If someone wants to build a strip club in Georgia, they have the right to come and build one. But the legislature can tell them, we're gonna zone you, time, place, and manner to like the side of the highway, somewhere hard to reach. So it will, because it's clear that they have all these secondary harmful effects, and we want the husband who's got 5 kids at home, who's driving to the strip club late at night to deal with his emotional pain, to think, I probably want to deal with my pain in a different way. And so. Anyway, now I'm going to break down what the bill says and does, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not sure that we need to go into the bill at this
Okay.
time. Since there is a bill being drafted here in Georgia,
Yes, sir.
then we'll look at that bill when the time comes. But I'm not sure we need to go through the bill that
I got you.
had been drafted. Was that drafted as a federal bill? Is that what?
No.
We have, HB 509 is already, we just had a subcommittee hearing in judiciary on it yesterday. But it's too late to move it this year, so this study committee is to study the issue between now and next year when it comes back up.
Right, and then bring the bill next year, since it was late this year. And I noticed you also, Representative Rakestraw, have a resolution on this
Yes.
in Health and Human Services.
That's the, yes, and that one is the resolution that declares pornography a public health crisis. And then there's also a resolution that dedicates the funds to mental health and addiction treatment.
Okay.
So this study committee is to study that issue in the interim.
All right, and I think, since the bill's already drafted and been heard by Judy, and we'll be back next year, let's dispense with that part of the presentation, if you don't mind.
Well, no, yes, sir. But the only thing is, the truth is the study committee is a result of the bill, is what she's saying. It's the study committee is basically doing research to support the bill. So if you don't know what the bill is, then you don't really know why the study committee should be there.
No,
It's
but
very
we need
complex
to
stuff.
evaluate the study committee. That's our responsibility, and I don't believe we need to rehash the bill to evaluate the study committee. So, but I do have some questions for you.
Okay.
If number 8.
That's me. Thank you for what you're doing, Representative Rakestraw. My question that I have is, if there's a bill, why do we need a study committee?
Because it was too late to move the bill this year, and we wanted to sure that we, have a good comprehensive, handle on that and the mental health and addiction piece that accompanies it.
Just like I guess my other colleagues, I'm a little confused. I see facts about pornography use with adults, men, women. I see Child Exploitation Prevention Act. I see something else, if I can pull it up. Johnny, what is his last name? Gosh. I'm seeing many different things here. And all these things that I do see, I believe that we need to deal with them. But when you break these things down individually, I think that these things need to be studied, I guess, on its own merits. But let's specifically talk about what you guys have been talking about as far as like adult pornography. It seems as if you guys want to legislate morality. There are many problems that are going on within our community, within this state, and it seems as if you guys want to snuff everything out with saying you guys want to outlaw or make it very hard for someone to view pornography, when pornography, I believe, is legal. It is obscene to some, but it is legal. But it seems as if you all want to legislate morality or your form of morality throughout this legislation. But to be honest with you, I really don't even see that in the resolution. That's why I'm confused.
Well, that's why we wanted to talk about the bill that accompanies this, because this does not legislate morality, and this does not prevent anyone from having access to pornography, because it is legal. What's not legal is child pornography, revenge pornography, access to prostitution hubs. That is illegal. Obscenity. Those areas are not legal, but pornography is legal. So this does not. And this is why, and it's a big issue. That's why we need to study it, because you've got the mental health and addiction stuff, and you've got the drivers of
question is
pornography. Well, can I finish?
Absolutely.
So the reason that's the reason we need to study it, because it is such a big issue. But the bill, HB 509, does not prevent anyone from getting pornography. It just reverses the process. So right now, we require parents to go and buy software and be technically savvy enough to set it up to protect their children from the visibility of this content on the devices. And we just reverse that process to say we're going to make the default setting, because a lot of this is illegal content, the default setting on computers and cell phones and devices, tablets, is that there's a filter that blocks the content. And if they want that, they can go to the retailer. They can say, they can say, here's my ID. I'm over 18. I want to opt in for this content, and I'm going to pay a $20 fee. And that $20 fee is what I want to dedicate to mental health and addiction. So that's why there are two bills related to this. And that's why we need to study this issue, because it is a big issue to get our hands around, and I don't want to go about it in a siloed way, because it is interconnected and there is a continuum that we need to be looking at to really solve the problem. Do you want to say anything on this?
Well,
Now, just a moment.
Sorry.
We still have, did you have any further questions?
That I can agree with, but my question is, why bring up something that is legal? From the facts that I see and what you guys are wanting to bring to our attention, just as an example, 64% of adult men and 42% of adult women view pornography at least monthly. Why bring that to our attention? Why is that important when we're dealing with?
So you can make a data-driven decision on the bills that we're bringing forward.
That makes me afraid of what you're actually trying to do. When you bring facts like this, and instead of dealing with specifically, which is pornography and children being able to actually view pornography, we can all agree on that. And I would love to move forward on something like that. But when you bring facts that deals with pornography, or at least, from my opinion, that you're trying to legislate morality for adults, that makes me very concerned.
No, we're not. Adults will still have access. It will just be in an opt-in way versus we get it whether we want it or not, and it's incumbent on the parents that didn't want it to try to figure out how to block it out.
All right, but I'm not going to allow the reading of the bill now, the discussion of the bill in this particular section. I have another question, Representative Turner, number 10, I believe.
Actually, if I could, what was the gentleman's name?
Chris.
Chris, what was your last name?
Sevier.
Could you spell that for me?
SEVIER.
SEVIER.
IER.
Thank you. Help me understand what you said earlier about legislating through the courts. You said you sued Google and Apple. What did you specifically sue them for?
For products liability violations, for racketeering and obscenity, racketeering and sex trafficking, false advertising. Those were some of the causes of action. All kinds of other things, consumer protection violations.
Were these federal lawsuits?
Yeah.
What circuit?
It started in Tennessee, and there's also so the Middle District of Tennessee. There's some really good pleadings before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then also lawsuits in Texas. But I mean, all of that was to give the background to then talk about what the bill is. And even his question was asking, what is the bill about? So I mean, if you don't have the breakdown of what the bill is, you're going to be in the dark and you're going to be confused.
I have actually had opportunity to read
It's good.
Representative Rakestraw's bill. Who had standing in the lawsuit?
So there was a lot of folks that have standing. People who have had pornographic addictions and things of this nature. So we have, there's right now the way we have it set is we could bring. Fight the New Drug provided us with 33,000 testimonials of minors who have been injured by having easy access to pornography online. And so, we've got lawyers geared up to be able to roll out class action lawsuits left and right. But we don't need to do that because we're rolling out the legislation that basically says the existing Georgia state obscenity codes and the existing federal law applies now to the tech companies.
So what was the outcome of the lawsuits?
Well, we basically got it ramped up, made the tech companies make their best arguments for why they shouldn't be regulated, and they could never get around to holding in the Supreme Court controlling case of Ashcroft versus AM Civil Liberties Union, and another case called Ginsburg. What the Ginsburg decision was that filters are the least restrictive means, and it was basically saying that and here I am talking about the bill, sir. And so so basically what the holding said was, all 50 states have a display statute now. And that statute says that if you have a 7-Eleven or a newsstand, in the state of Georgia, for example, you can sell a Rolling Stone magazine next to a SEC football magazine next to a Playboy and Hustler. But the Playboy and Hustler, the retailer has to put the Playboy and Hustler, the obscene content, as defined under the Georgia obscenity statute, behind a blinder rack, an opaque covering. But it's not a legislating morality. That filter law is not, because if the consumer is over 18 and wants to have access to Playboys and Hustlers and so forth, they just have to show proof of ID, and the filter will be disabled by the retailer, and they can have the content. The Supreme Court, when they struck down the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, they did so because it violated the First Amendment. That bill effectively tried to regulate individual porn content websites, trying to make it harder to access them. The Supreme Court was basically like, we don't have jurisdiction over porn content creators overseas, and so it's really not going to do anything. And so the Supreme Court was the one that said filters are the least restrictive means.
I'm sorry, I'm going to reel you in a little bit. What was the outcome of, the question was, what was the outcome? Did you win? Did you lose?
Well, we got it to the point where we stayed it because we didn't need to win, because we're really not we're not against the tech companies. We want them to modify their products in a manner that's going to create a new revenue stream, which is complex to understand how that is. And it will create about $66 million annually for the state of Georgia, is what our calculations show. Anywhere from $40 million to $66, that's annually, which would be appropriated in the way that she thinks would be, beneficial. But so we got it to the point where we stayed it, because it wasn't about. We basically can show, and we've met with countless attorney generals throughout the United States, all of who are saying.
I'm sorry, I'm going to reel you in again.
Sorry, yeah.
Because I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah.
Because I do have a couple follow-ups.
Sure.
The outcome basically was that
we stayed it.
You stayed it.
We got it to it wasn't thrown out on the merits. It wasn't decided on the merits. We vetted the law. It was a total power play, is what it was. So we could turn around and then use the legislatures to make the tech companies comply with the state and federal obscenity codes, because we want the real freedom interest here, in terms of what your question was. The real true freedom interest is the ability for a consumer to choose whether or not they can have exposure.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I know we've got some other people that wanted to have time to talk, and if
I'll wrap
you
this up
answered
quickly.
his question, let's let that go and
Okay.
do the follow-up.
This is the follow-up.
Sure, yeah.
Because the thrust of the piece of legislation that you want to study, so I'm trying to help you here and keep it on topic.
Yes, sir.
The thrust of the piece of legislation you want to study would require the owner of one of these to pay a $20 fee to turn on access to pornography. Is that right?
That's a mischaracterization, respectfully.
Okay.
This bill regulates the retail stores within the state of Georgia. It's just like there's the filter laws that already regulate the physical bricks and mortar stores in the state.
I, as the consumer, would have to pay a fee to turn on access.
To opt in to having access to child pornography, prostitution hubs, revenge pornography, and obscenity as defined under the state and federal obscenity code.
So you're not talking about adult pornography?
We're not necessarily talking about that as defined.
Not necessarily, or
Well-
not talking about
Well,
it?
a lot of pornography is obscene, so that's why I was saying. So it's
All
yeah,
right.
I mean it's blocked by default.
I'm gonna wave now. Thank you,
Yeah,
Chairman.
let's do. I think we've run that rabbit as far as we can run it. And number 15.
If you'll turn on 17.
Oh, 17. Okay. Excuse me.
I think we probably both had a similar question. Representative Rakestraw, obviously, I respect your intent, and I think the just to kind of agree with the chairman to a certain degree. My familiarity with study committees is that you're studying something in order to produce legislation, not take legislation and study it, so to speak. So I guess my thoughts there is that it seems to be working in reverse order, just similarly to this hearing today. And Mr. Chairman, I concur that to stay with the resolution is more of a comment, I guess, than a question. But I certainly respect the intent of what you were trying to accomplish, Representative.
Yeah, it was suggested in the drafting process because it was a big bill that we've honed down, that we study the issue before we finalize what we've dropped. So what we've dropped is in, draft mode. It was, we took the information, we honed it down, but, it was suggested by the attorneys that I worked with and Ledge Counsel that we further study this issue before we finalize the bill that we move through, because it is such a big issue.
All right, and thank you, Representative Shaw, for that comment. We are out of time, and we have used up the time that I'm afraid some other people. Who else did we have that wished to speak to this?
Do you want to speak? Okay.
One more.
Do you want to speak?
Yeah,
Okay.
those two.
She'll be brief. She'll take less than 10
I hate
minutes.
for you to come and not be able to have your say. I'm going to limit it to 2 minutes, however, if you will, because we are past time, and I'm not sure whether we've got anybody else in here or not. But
hello, Mr. Chair. I'm Michelle Vanderpool. I appreciate you listening. This is a very difficult subject in all the ways. I have recently located to your lovely city from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm originally from Kansas, born in Iowa, grew up there, and that's probably why you're seeing a lot of the Johnny Gosh issues. I actually dealt with that personally. I am a hair and makeup artist in the film industry. That's what brought me here. Thank you very much for the support. And with the background that I've had that's led me here, I worked on many America's Most Wanted TV shows. I don't know if you're familiar with any of those. So maybe nods of heads would, yes, okay. So they really hit some really hard subjects. And I got to firsthand see the witnesses speak. And I'm going to try to cut short on this because I know I've got a 2 minute and a minute I've already used. I'm glad to discuss any of that in the future, but what it brought to fruition was the mental anguish that all the families served. And so that was just one thing in my life. Moving on, in Nashville, Tennessee, I worked with Mayor Carl Dean in the homeless situations and seeing what hopeless meant. And right now, this bill to me means hope for these people, because there is so many mental illnesses brought on by whether you're a vet, whether you were injured in a work injury and you no longer can work, family situations, whether it's been a kidnapping or I can't even say the word because it's so difficult for me, the pedophiles, the format, but to help you bring all this into a group of all the bills all the different things and programs you're hearing. It's really about the mental that is being missed in these programs, and there's no mental help. Like I've noticed that your city is lovely, and then you go to the outskirts and I see empty malls and I see homeless people, and that tells me that there's no help out there because they're on the streets, and they're on the streets at night. And so this study is going to have to help this all come together, whether it's gambling, whether it's the pornography, whether it's just simple help that they're trying to reach out. There's a big hole, and I think this study will help bring that together, and that bill will really help that focus.
Okay, thank you very much, and your
Mhm.
compassion for these people shows in your speech. But thank you very much.
If you want more, just go to one of those shows. It is an inkling of what they can actually put on there because they can't put that on there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, if there are no further questions, I'm sorry, we had one other public.
Hi, my name is Courtney Dow. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor. I work with the Atlanta Dream Center and Out of Darkness. I had a lot more to say, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I've been working with survivors of commercial sexual exploitation for 12 years. Out of those experiences, I would like to share the lines between exotic dancing, prostitution, and pornography are blurry at best. Within the industry, there is no distinction between them. Porn is intertwined within every area. You've heard that porn is the gateway drug for people abusing others for their own gratification. The more an individual watches, the harder it is to achieve ejaculation, and it causes individuals to search out more dangerous and more risky avenues of gratification. And it often leads to the abuse of individuals who I call my friends. According to an international study on prostitution by Melissa Farley, 49% of individuals in prostitution were forced to make pornography, while 47% of individuals were upset by an attempt to make them do what had been seen in pornography. And while the experiences of individuals in prostitution are devastating, when I'm walking with a victim through restoration, our main focus tends to be on early childhood trauma. And pornography has played a role in nearly every story I've heard of childhood sexual trauma for trafficking victims or otherwise. I believe that with every ounce of my being that we as a society do not understand the role of trauma in our lives, especially early childhood trauma, and that's trauma that happens between the ages of 0 and 6 years old. And even pictures, photographs can be traumatic on the brain. We're raising up generations who haven't known life without the internet. The situation is already dire now, and this is our generation who pornography wasn't as accessible as it is today. And so if that's the case, then what does our future look like for teenagers, and for children? Porn, along with the objectification of women and children in the media, is shaping how boys and girls and eventually men and women interact with each other and how we define what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And these intimate interactions, which were intended to produce life, are beginning to produce fear, shame, and death. I've personally had to go to local high schools, both public and private, to speak on the issue of sexting. Because it's considered normal for a boy now to ask a girl for inappropriate pictures. I'm concerned about our future. I'm grateful that you're here and allowing me to speak, and I'm hoping that we're able to find out more about the role of trauma and how that affects our society. Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us today. And with that, the committee meeting is adjourned.